Hello. Okay. Hello, everyone. We're just waiting for a few more people to trickle in and some other speakers, so we'll just give it another minute, but we'll start soon, and thank you for coming. Oh, there he is. Okay. Hello.
Hello, you look familiar.
Hi. It's okay, yeah, I'm just gonna do a quick little open. All right. We're gonna begin. So, welcome everybody to today's session on corporate accountability to combat climate change, biodiversity loss, and desertification. I just want to say thank you so much to the Action on Food Hub Pavilion and for all the panelists for joining us. We're really excited to have this conversation because this topic has come up quite a lot today and throughout the week, and a lot of people have been working very hard for a long time to try to make this convergence work. So I think it's a really important topic we keep pushing. So the aim of today's panel is to address the challenges that a lot of us are working on around the Rio Conventions, and there's a similar challenge that we face, which is fragmentation. And so while climate change, biodiversity loss, and land degradation are deeply interconnected, the systems that govern corporate accountability for these issues operate in silos. So this creates duplication for companies, misalignment for policymakers, and missed opportunities for impact. So thankfully, and Gonzalo, I think you'll talk to this a bit more later, but we did hear yesterday an announcement that was very exciting about how there will be more alignment across the conventions, and we applaud Gonzalo and the Ambition Loop team for the leadership on this. But I will leave it to you now for some opening remarks.
Thanks so much, Dara. Yeah, we've been talking yesterday and today about something that probably 33 years ago was unimaginable. Even 3 years ago was unimaginable. The world was so different 33 years ago that it was probably quite reasonable to say, oh, we have this problem with climate change. Let's create a convention that is tackling that, mostly led by the developed countries. Then South America said, and by the way, we have a big problem, Latin America in general, we have a big problem with our biodiversity loss. Okay, let's create another convention on biodiversity. And then the African countries said, and by the way, for us the main problem is desertification. We're losing the land, and the drought is affecting us. Of course, let's create another one on desertification. Now it seems like weird, right? Why do we have to talk about these three main topics so isolated? And even including other ones. We are in the midst, and hopefully in the last process of a treaty to end plastic pollution, a huge environmental problem that comes very much related to petrochemicals, and at the same time is affecting biodiversity, capacity of producing food, is totally related to the climate crisis in many ways. So it's necessary, but also it's quite magical what happened yesterday to start this coordinated work across the Rio Conventions, but then with a very particular focus on the role of non-state actors. We know that when it comes to this huge structure of the conventions, I always say that it will be easier to unify Ireland before we unify the three Rio Conventions at the UN level, right? But when it comes to the non-state actors, when it comes to subnational governments, businesses, civil society, indigenous communities, business and financial institutions, academia, schools, like all of them operate, not only have to, but operate in a way that they do things for the good of the planet, for the good of people, for the good of the environment, and in one action, they are tackling the three of them. And of course, we know that climate change, biodiversity loss, land degradation, water, agri-food systems, all of them are absolutely interconnected. And often, they're creating harmful feedback loops. But the interconnectedness also means that addressing these challenges in an integrated, holistic manner can definitely deliver the opposite, countless benefits to people, nature, and climate. And we're already seeing that. Specifically in certain sectors, of course, agribusiness, food, forest, everything that comes with indigenous communities is like with one action, boom, the benefits spreads immediately. And here in Belén, we're seeing the best conditions for accelerating that joint work. And that's, the logic of the Belén joint statement on the Rio Conventions that was announced yesterday, that I was mentioning, is paving the way for increased non-state actor coordination across the Rio Convention. It is definitely a milestone in aligning the presidency-led initiatives for land restoration, sustainable resources management, ecosystem resilience across the three Rio Conventions, and definitely other domino effects. This joint statement affirms a shared commitment to harmonize efforts to revitalize degraded lands, protect ecosystem, enhance community resilience, and foster green jobs and sustainable livelihoods while combating climate change. It underscores the importance of shared monitoring systems, inclusive finance, and coherent policy framework to sustain ecosystem service, support rural economies, and catalyze cross-convention collaboration for climate adaptation, resilience, and land recovery. It is not only a coordinated action by real economy actors, but also a huge political effort from states and the UN system that can enable profitable, scalable solutions at speed, unlocking a triple win for people, business, and the environment. So as well as driving tangible impact for climate, biodiversity, and land, the private sector also increasingly helps shape policy. That's the logic of the ambition loop. We have received the message from the global policy system, not only through the ambition loop. We received another message yesterday with this joint work that sends a message to the real economy actors, and we hope then that the private sector, businesses can help shape that into policy through science-based target setting, right? It's not just, I want to do whatever fits to my self-interest. Based on science, following the evidence, following the scientific knowledge, helping to set the conditions for voluntary carbon and nature markets, corporate disclosure frameworks, and sectoral alliance, knowing that it's really important, the MRV, we need to monitor, we need to verify, and aligning the private sector efforts that then can help the governments. That's the logic, again, of the ambition loop. So then, if we do the work right, we will be helping national strategies on climate, biodiversity, and land to be aligned with what is happening in the real economy and what is required to fulfill the goals of the three Rio Conventions. We can craft integrated NDCs and national biodiversity strategies and action plans, produce more robust, coherent and environmental governance, and then create the new playing field for everyone to compete, but in a way that is reasonable for everyone, for the planet, and for every ecosystem. The private sector is driving coordinated action across climate, biodiversity, and land. I'm living it by my own. I am an actor of the business community, and I've seen also I'm a co-founder of the global movement of B Corps. I'm in the board of Science-Based Targets. I'm seeing firsthand those efforts that definitely has multiple benefits for business, people, and the environment. And then for business, it definitely means super-powered strategies like nature-positive climate mitigation, regenerative agriculture, sustainable forestry, besides everything that we're seeing when it comes to renewable energy, when it comes to EVs, reducing the cost, making it more efficient, obtaining better interest rates. Like it's, when I go around, it's like hard to find someone that do not understand how powerful it is to embrace this zero emission and regenerative economy. It prevents duplicative, inconsistent, or conflicting efforts by strengthening reporting and strategy coherence. That will be fascinating if we find a way for reporting just in a more congregated way, not to report one in climate, one in biodiversity, and another one on land degradation, and deliver more impactful investment as projects deliver multiple environmental benefits. It will strengthen supply chain resilience, significantly reducing volatility and disruption. It also will accelerate innovation, creating new markets and competitive advantages, but also it will attract more talent. Yesterday we were talking about the academy, probably Lygia will talk about it, how much this agenda is also one that fits for purpose when it comes to those generations, that talent that we need in our companies. Well, that talent, the more sophisticated it is, it will come with more prerequisite in relation to this triple agenda. So thanks so much, hoping that you will bring much more lightning ideas than the one I brought. Thank you, Dara.
Thank you so much, Gonzalo, and for your continued leadership and all the work that you've been doing, but also for setting the scene for us. We still have a lot of work to do, so I hope we can continue to discuss that today. Next, I'm going to pass it to my colleague, Maria Azul Schwartzman, who's going to talk to some of the work that we've been doing at WBA around the 3 Rio Conventions and harmonizing. So I'll pass it to you.
No, there. Thank you, Dara. Thank you, Gonzalo, for setting the scene. I am Azul Schwartzman, and I work at the World Benchmarking Alliance. For those of you who don't know us, we are a business-facing organization that works on assessing the 2,000 biggest companies of the world. This is not an opt-in, opt-out list. It is the biggest companies. It will only be this. There won't be a presentation. But if you want to access the report, I encourage you to use your phone and access it via the QR. Yeah, but we're an organization that benchmarks the 2,000 biggest companies of the world on 7 set of indicators, one of those being transition plans, and of course we also have indicators on nature, on land, on food, social indicators, etc. So I want to bring first a little bit of an anecdote on why we started working on synergies. I mean, we naturally work on synergies because of our 7-system transformation approach. But to be honest, last year with a colleague that you might know, Rayam Kasim, we traveled to Riyadh and we engaged a lot in the Riyadh Action Agenda and the UNCCD process on my end for the first time. And when we left, we had this idea lingering about there is a possibility here. We engage mainly with business stakeholders and other business-facing organizations, and we were left thinking there is an opportunity here. Because at the end of the day, businesses are speaking the same, right? With different approaches in each of the conventions, but they are all trying to advance their sustainability goals, and they find the synergies when they implement them, right? Because for them, nature, land, and climate, there's not a divided line. There are different reportings, but there's not a divided line in the actual business strategy they deploy in their businesses. So we started thinking, and then the CBD made a call, I think May this year, if I'm not mistaken, on policy coherence across the convention, and that made us gather with other business-facing organizations, Women Business and Business for Nature, and we started to think, what would a coherent approach for the non-state actor community, particularly companies and private sector, that's the stakeholder we work with the most, would look like across the 3 conventions. So it was a bit thanks to the Riyadh Action Agenda, but also thanks to the prompt the CBD gave us all. And then, of course, it continued at the SBs with the SBASTA item that is being negotiated here still. So with this, we wrote this report that you can access here with the QR code, which is encouraging private sector contribution and strengthening accountability to deliver the Rio Trio's shared goals. Why? Because, again, we see this interconnection, but we also see there's fragmented engagement in the 3 conventions. Each of the conventions, as Gonzalo was saying, at the convention level are very complex to bridge, and we find with private sector stakeholders that is increasingly challenges for us to engage with them in the 3 different settings, or even more, right? Because they also engage in the General Assembly, they also engage in other forums, and it's complicated for us to make them understand the importance of engaging and raising their voice and showing their advances in these settings. And then, because there is an opportunity, right? So this year, the COP30 presidency relaunched the action agenda, and I think walking towards the right direction in terms of harmonizing, in terms of doing one action agenda for the first time, but also we have the Riyadh action agenda, which I'm sure Jennifer will explain a lot more and in much more detail than I can. And we have the opportunity that the CBD was opening as well. So we said, okay, the moment is now, but we need to have, we're a benchmarking alliance, right? We need to have a benchmark. Where are we standing? So this is why we created a framework, which you can see. I'm not going to go into detail in it. In the publication, we analyze 3 levels that we understand are the basic for a non-state actor, particularly private sector, to engage in these conventions, which is A, participation, B, responsibility, and C, monitoring. Participation refers to, is there an avenue for the non-state actor community to actively participate? B, is responsibility clearly detailed in the mandate or in any negotiated text of the convention? And C, is there a monitoring framework in place for those commitments or those actions that the non-state actor community is giving? I'll do a very brief recap of where we are with the 3 conventions, but I encourage all our other panelists to give our thoughts as well. So UNFCCC, we all know very well. We have the Marrakesh Partnership. We have the High-Level Climate Champions team. They're doing a lot of effort to mobilize the non-state actor community. This year, for the first time, we have a unified action agenda with over 30 working groups. Having said that, responsibility in the Paris Agreement is vague for the business sector. There is no negotiated text that speaks directly of what is expected of the non-state actor community. I know it's super contentious, but we're amongst friends, so I can say it. And the monitoring with the NASCA platform, but also with our initiatives such as the Race to Resilience, Race to Zero, and others, it is very good, but it's fragmented. And when we are approached by a business that wants to engage here, it is for us sometimes complicated to show them a clear pathway forward for them to actively engage in this process. The CBD, we understand, has the most comprehensive target in their text, which is target 15, which speaks directly of what governments should require companies, especially large multinational companies, in regards to their responsibility with biodiversity laws and nature protection. And also in Decision 15.5, they outline a monitoring framework. And then in the UNCCD, we have the Riyadh Action Agenda, which is gaining a lot of traction, and the Business for Land initiative, which renewed their mandate last year. So we're excited to see where that goes. To wrap up, what we see, as I was saying, is an opportunity, right? We want to bridge the 3 conventions, but the 3 conventions are 3 legal different frameworks that were born over, 30 years ago. So that road to bridging the 3 conventions in whatever ways we see possible, particularly for parties, will be the most challenging one. But there is a very big opportunity in the non-state actor community, and particularly with private sector, because here is we have more wiggle room. We're not binded by mandates, and I think that if the action agendas in the future could speak to one another, organizations that are business facing like we are, but also others, could engage businesses in a more synergetic way, I think it would be a benefit for everyone, for people, for planet, for land, for nature, and for us all. So yeah, thank you. And you can access our beautiful report in the QR, and if you have any more questions, we can take them afterwards.
Thank you, Azul. Thank you so much for the overview. I'll invite panelists to come back on stage now. And yeah, I would love to introduce them. We have quite a great lineup, and we are also covering almost all the conventions. So I will start by introducing Jennifer Lenhart. She is the Director of Land and Soil at Ambition Loop, and she is supporting the UNCCD COP16 presidency on the delivery of the Riyadh Action Agenda. Welcome, Jennifer. Next, Khalid El Tawel, Senior Program Officer at the UN Food Systems Coordination Hub. Welcome. Tristan Tyrell, Program Officer at CBD, and Ligia Ramos, the Regional Lead of LATAM at SBTI. So just a quick round of applause. Welcome. So I'm going to start with you, Jennifer. Based on your work leading the Riyadh Action Agenda and your work on land in the UNFCCC setting, what is the expectation of companies to achieve global goals on land degradation?
Well, is it on? Yeah? Okay. I have to say, after that fantastic build-up, Maria, I don't know what more I can add. It's so wonderful to hear so much support from a very new action agenda that only launched a year ago, but it has gained so much momentum because of partners like you. And there are many other partners we've been working with throughout this week. So it's great to know that this action agenda is still alive and thriving and certainly learning so much from the climate space. So I might take your question in reverse. So obviously Gonzalo Munoz, former UN high-level climate champion for Chile, an expert in the action agenda space, and how can we leverage that action agenda narrative, learn from everything that has happened in climate, all the robustness, even the chaos, and take that to another process in order to create a similar momentum and a North Star message. So that's one of the core pieces of work we tried to do. And another key piece of that was learning and aligning. The learning piece was just, what has made the action agenda tick in this space? This year, I think the action agenda has really come to a new area with so much momentum, so much enthusiasm, lots of emails and so many forms to fill out. And yet, we were talking about this in our stock take yesterday. Despite the craziness, we all filled out all of those forms because there's such an energy to be a part of this coordinated community and know that you are listened to, know that you are heard, and know that the presidency really wants to engage with you. So we want to take that same sense of listening, and we've been working with the Kingdom of Saudi Arabia, and they are super excited about bringing the action agenda to the UNCCD space. Under their leadership, knowing the momentum that we need to, 1.5 billion hectares of land that needs to be restored by 2030. There's a huge role to play for so many different communities. Within this action agenda, we are leading the plan to accelerate solutions, working closely with you guys on business engagement and local government. So that's starting now, but we will be working in that for the next few years. And the alignment narrative that's very relevant also for the Riyadh action agenda. So how can we see what is happening here and pivot to that process? Gonzalo also mentioned a high-level event yesterday on synergies, not only synergies across the processes, but across the action agenda, because it's in particularly very important for the real economy, whether you're a mayor, whether you're a smallholder farmer, whether you're a business CEO, to be able to address all of these at the same time. We just jumped from the other room here, which was a similar discussion, but talking to frontline workers, frontline actors that are, really indigenous communities, farmers, and so many others that are also calling for that same narrative. So I think what is most important is policy coherence. This helps us be competitive, but also that alignment, especially when it comes to reporting. Reporting fatigue is real, and having that synergistic narrative that not only makes the process work a little easier, but we can learn and accelerate together.
Thank you. I really appreciate the kind of shedding light on the area of learnings and alignment, because I feel like if we continue in the same way without learning and taking a step back, we're going to continue as is. So I really appreciate that note, and also highlighting the importance of inclusion. So the other panel or the other dialogue, I think, is really key to have in this discussion. Great. I will turn now to Khalid. So in your experience working on corporate accountability frameworks in the UN Coordination Hub, what do you think are the bottlenecks when it comes to corporate accountability, and what can we do to overcome them?
Yes, thank you so much. And let me start by congratulating the World Benchmarking Alliance on addressing a very important issue at the heart of climate action and food system transformation, which is corporate accountability. I start with a very important observations that Gonzalo made about how the three conventions were created. They were created for different objectives at different times. That's why being legal instruments, they are not so much connected. But actually the objectives and the challenges they are addressing are connected. And they are connected through food systems. When we look at food systems, producing 1/3 of greenhouse gas emissions, leading to climate change leading to biodiversity loss and desertification, we in the Food Systems Hub believe that food system can be one of the key interventions for connecting the three layer conventions. We have launched the Convergence Initiative in COP28. I believe you were there. And the Convergence Initiative is actually at the core of this work. How to connect the three layer convention through work at the ground, at the national level. And we have implemented the Convergence Initiative in 20 countries. where these countries produce what is called convergence blueprint, which is a roadmap with a vision, interventions and milestones and monitoring and evaluation to say, we stand here, how can we connect food system policies with climate action policies? This is not happening at the ground automatically. It needs intervention, it needs conscious work between the Ministry of Environment and the Ministry of Agriculture. And with this, I would like to link to your question on corporate accountability. The Hub has worked with the World Benchmark Alliance, UNGC, for 2 years on the corporate accountability. And there was a product of this, which is a corporate accountability framework. At the core of this work is how to encourage the private sector to engage in a more sustainable way in supporting food system transformation. To be honest, the document that was produced did not receive consensus. Some believed it was lenient on the private sector, and some believed that it was so much demanding on the private sector. I understand now that the UNGC and the UNEP and you are picking up on this, and I believe it is very important learning from experience to build on what already exists. We have already some monitoring and reporting systems that exist. We need to harmonize this. And I believe that the engagement of the private sector and making sure that the private sector receive incentives and disincentives at the same time. Incentives when they do the right thing. We need to differentiate between private sector is doing the right things and private sector who is not doing the right thing. How can we encourage them to produce health, nutrition, environmental and social outcomes that are in line with sustainability? This is not an easy task. So first build on the existing frameworks, engage the private sector at an early stage, and work also with the network of national conveners, food system national conveners, who actually are tasked with the important objective of supporting the transformation of food systems. They are connecting different ministries, and I believe they can provide the needed support. My last point from my side, at the end of the Food System Summit in Ethiopia in July, there was a call to action from the Secretary General. And at the core of this call to action is a call to engage the private sector in a sustainable way. We had, for the first time, a strong participation from the private sector. We need to capitalize on this. We need to encourage them and make sure that they produce sustainable outcomes. Thank you.
Thank you. And also thank you for setting up kind of the clear next steps of things that need to be done. And I think I heard it in both of your interventions around the importance of monitoring and metrics, but also about coherence and setting clear expectation for the private sector. So thank you. All right, next I will turn to you, Tristan. So under the coming Montreal Global Biodiversity Framework, Target 15, as Azul mentioned, calls on large companies and financial institutions to assess, disclose, and reduce their impacts on biodiversity. I want to know how are we seeing this translate into real progress and accountability across the private sector?
Thanks very much for that question, and I'll get back to you in a year. At COP17, we have the outcomes of our global review on collective progress, so we will know better then, hopefully. But one of the, I suppose, strong signals that that particular target sent was that there is a role for the private sector in achieving the objectives, overall objectives of the convention, but also certainly the targets and the overarching vision and mission of the GBF. But there are other targets within the framework that also speak to the role of the private sector. I'm thinking of Target 18 on addressing harmful subsidies, noting that UNEP's State of Nature Finance report a couple of years ago highlighted that private sector invests 140 times more in actions that harm biodiversity than they do that actually support them. And then Target 19 on the role of financial support has this request of $200 billion a year, including from private sources. Now, we shouldn't just look to the private sector for cash, although many people do. But one of the issues, though, within the convention is that there are many companies that are coming forward saying that they want to do more, but they want to see a level playing field. That if they are going to take positive actions, they don't want to then be undercut by others who are undermining. And so there needs to be this concerted effort from the whole community, yourselves and those companies themselves, the civil society sector more broadly, but then also those parties that are actually trying to be more progressive, so that the decisions that are being taken in the actual implementation of the GBF also then supports this sort of common approach, and not just necessarily focusing on the big corporate entities. Of course, they might play an outsized role, but recognizing that when you're getting down to it, even small to medium-sized companies have potentially an even stronger role to play and should be brought in and felt part of this process. Gonzalo, you mentioned the action agendas and the linking of non-state actors. Unfortunately, within the CBD, there was a bit of an issue with the CBD action agenda, in that it was a set of commitments, but there was no transparency. There was no following up on that to make sure that those actions that they said that they were going to do, they actually ultimately did. And it wasn't just frankly, a greenwashing exercise or an opportunity for some to say, look at the wonderful work we're doing, but actually we're not. We're really doing the exact opposite. Now with the GBF and increasing accountability that's coming from the likes of WBA and GRI and various others, the role of TNFD, but also recent legislation, for instance, EU's Corporate Sustainability Reporting Directive, that is to require stronger accountability and transparency, means that actually overall this concern and, I suppose, more positive movements are actually happening. The issue is that, are they enough collectively to do so? And I mean, we can look at some of the discussions happening here about trying to implement decisions that were even taken just a year ago, and some of the potential backtracking that's happening there. I shouldn't really be commenting on negotiations in this process, but you know, hopefully you get what I'm trying to get at. But unfortunately, the same thing happens in our process, and there are certain people who still see it as economic development versus environment, and not recognizing the fundamental underpinning that healthy biodiversity ecosystems has in terms of overall economic development, as well as, of course, livelihoods, as well as the planet overall. Thanks.
Thank you, Tristan. And yeah, I appreciate also the part about how it is an economic benefit for companies to be taking into consideration biodiversity, climate change, and land degradation. I think one thing that you noted too was around the community effort and how that can really support implementation, and having a common approach is really key. So happy we have everyone in the room together that can work together on this. And I'm going to move to you, Ligia. So many companies are setting targets, which is great, but measurement doesn't always translate into action on the ground. So I want to know from you, what needs to change in policy, incentives, or frameworks to ensure that science-based targets are actually driving tangible outcomes for land, biodiversity, and climate?
Thank you, Dara. I'm so happy to be here with this group of panelists. And I'm sorry, but I have to challenge the assumption a little bit about the fact that the science-based targets are not translating into action on the ground, and I'm going to share why with you. So we have just very recently published a report on the impact of science-based target setting. This was just 2 weeks ago, before us all traveling to COP. And in this report, we have asked the companies that already have science-based targets for at least 2 years on how they were measuring the impacts of having a science-based targets for their businesses. And the responses have been super, super interesting, and I'm going to share a few of them with you. So from this report, so first of all, companies that have a science-based targets are decarbonizing much faster than companies that don't have them, at a much faster rate. And they said that 9 in 10 companies report a very positive impact of having a science-based targets. 86% of them have accelerated their decarbonization path because of having the science-based target. And 80% of them also cited that they have a stronger strategic cohesion because of having science-based targets. So we know that target setting is just a very small piece of what these companies are doing to decarbonize, but now we are reviewing our corporate net zero standard. That is our flagship standard. It's kind of the umbrella standard for the science-based targets. So it says how companies should establish and develop the science-based targets. And in this framework, or the new version of the framework that is now under public consultation, we are going beyond only the target setting piece and asking companies to also showcase their ambition to reach this state of net zero, to showcase how they are in the base year of setting their targets so that they can then tracking their progress in the end of it. We are also proposing them to have a transition plan so that they publicly announce how they are aiming to transition into this state of net zero. Then we have the target setting, and finally we have this progress on target setting. So our aim is that every year companies will report how they are progressing, which obstacles they have been facing, and how they are aiming to kind of surpass these obstacles. So we do believe that this will be a very good mechanism for us as the science-based targets to understand how they are progressing, but beyond this, for the overall market to kind of check how they are progressing and also hold them accountable. And just a few minutes ago, I was in this NASCA portal event with Manuel Pulgar, who is also part of our board. And Manuel was remembering us about all the Lima Paris climate action agenda, the relevance of the portal and so on, and how relevant it was for transparency and for accountability for companies. And maybe with this new progress tracking process that we are including in the second version of the net zero standard of the SBTI, maybe it can also support the countries to achieve their NDCs, because they would have a basis or a place to go for to check how companies with science-based targets are achieving or not their targets, right? And then this can go to the NASCA portal, who knows, in the future.
Thank you, and thank you for shedding light on something positive and how that the science-based targets are actually really driving change. I really appreciate the kind of overview and maybe some onward looking of how we'll see transition plans improving and how targets will get more ambitious. So thank you. Okay, I would love to open to the floor if there are any questions. If there's anyone, raise your hand. If not, I have one more question for the full panel. Any questions? Yes. Do we have a mic?
So Tristan, there you are. Thank you. So Tristan, can you be a little bit more explicit on what was like the bad behavior that blocked the progress of non-state actors, mostly even from the business sector, greenwashing? Because I think that what happened in the CBD is something that we should all learn about. What we have done wrong, what the business sector should never do again, and how at the end there's a permanent risk of losing trust, of losing credibility, right? And I think that it's important in this moment when we're building trust and sometimes gaining a lot of trust. Let's if as much as you can, go deeper into that learning process and include what not to do.
Thank you for the question.
Thanks very much. So the issue was that it was just a portal to put in your commitments, but there was no follow-up. So there was no then request to actually demonstrate that they had implemented something linked to those commitments. It was just a website that, as far as I know, is actually still live. That just this was under the Aichi targets, so it's probably a good 10 years ago now at this point, maybe longer. And so there was just a general kind of concern that it was too easy for companies and others, not just the private sector, but frankly, often the companies are seen as the bad guys in our world anyway. That they would put something up there and then no one would question them about it. So the idea now is there is actually currently a call for how's it framed? Non-national governments. So it could be subnational actors, governments, municipals, but also private sector, civil society, everyone, to provide new commitments relating to the GBF, but linked to that then is also targets and indicators and being able to actually demonstrate that it's not just we're going to plant 100 million hectares of forests, but actually at the same time we're just cutting them down. that sort of idea, that there's actually accountability and transparency to it. Because as I mentioned, next year with that global review, there is going to be that moment of realizing to what extent do we need to be, all of us, stepping up with ambition. And we keep talking about whole of society approaches as well as whole of government. How is the whole of society also stepping up? But that framework that you mentioned, the monitoring framework, decision 15.5, that's really for parties to report on. It's not so much for other actors. So there needs to be that reporting system. And so we are looking to things like the NASCA platform. We're looking to see what comes out with the Riyadh Action Agenda to see how we can sort of reinvigorate that. We're trying to find another way of calling it other than Action Agenda because of, unfortunately, that tarnished wording. But we'll see how that goes. But we want that collective action. It just needs to be demonstrated, implementation, not just broad commitments.
Thank you, Tristan. And thank you for the question. I think my wrap-up question that I would love to hear from everyone follows on really nicely to the learning question. From your work or from your perspective, what is next to drive synergies across conventions? And you can share some learnings or some things that are driving why you think that this is the important next step. So yeah, we'll start maybe, Leisha, if you want to start. We'll go in reverse.
Yes, of course. So I think let me get the exact words to share with you. But the other day, David Kennedy, our CEO, was in a panel with ISO, and he was sharing how we are working together with ISO to try to connect our standards. So I think same for the conventions is probably on consistency and complementarity. So these were his words for working with ISO, and I think this is also what we could aim for these three conventions to work together, specifically also when we think about the private sector engagement. So how we can make them more palatable in terms of where they connect, where are the gaps, and what are the main topics that the private sector can drive action in these two agendas. So I would say with this, his words on consistency and complementarity.
Thank you. Tristan, I don't know if you have anything else you want to add to complement your last statement.
Sure. Actually, there's a couple of things. Specifically when it comes to the private sector, need to recognize that yes, we need all companies at all sizes to be looking at this interlinkage between climate action, biodiversity, land degradation, sustainable development more broadly, but also to recognize that there are inherent trade-offs within that. So Gonzalo, you mentioned about EVs and this move to clean tech. There is a potential negative biodiversity impact in looking for these minerals, etc. There needs to be that recognition that while they might be doing great things under this particular process, they could be harming under others, and there needs to be some sort of at least acknowledgement of that, minimizing those trade-offs, and then looking at how to account for those, how to respond to those. And we don't really like this idea of sort of biodiversity mitigation necessarily, thinking about rehabilitating one area based on actions in another. But there needs to be that sort of recognition of that mitigation hierarchy and seeing what can be done under that. So that's one thing. The other thing was COP16 last year, now specifically biodiversity and climate, but also in our cooperation decision, called for this process of looking for options for enhanced policy coherence and cooperation. And I know that report was linked to that call for submissions. And so thank you very much to WBA and partners for providing the inputs from the private sector on that. Our subset just a couple of weeks ago called for continuation of that process. And so we would like to see these non-state actors, and in particular the private sector, coming forward, being participating in that, because frankly, you do have a strong role to play in this. Yes, these conventions are party-led processes, but we need to recognize that it's not just parties and UN agencies and the bingos, the big environmental NGOs kind of driving the discussion, but also that very much the private sector has a role to play in that. And we'll see what happens in that cooperation decision here, but there was a similar one under UNCCD last year in Riyadh, and so there is this call for the three conventions to be working together to look at these opportunities, look at these options, and then develop this multi-level roadmap. And so that will account for the various different actors, the various different stakeholders, but also short, medium, and long-term actions, and thinking about how do we plan towards 2030, but even potentially post-2030, and how do we, obviously, let's achieve the GBF and Paris and SDGs and all the rest of it by 2030, but also thinking about what are we doing long-term in terms of legacy. Thanks.
Very positive to see that the work will continue. All right, I will turn to you, Khalid. Maybe try the other one, maybe.
Okay, 2 key points from my side. One, show evidence that this synergy between the three-layer conventions will bring efficiency. The private sector and others need to understand that this is not just for synergy, but also bring direct benefits and efficiencies. Second, down-top approach that engage everyone, something very inclusive that also take into consideration the different contexts at the national level.
Thank you. Well, I like to pick up on the point about the mining sector and EVs, living in Chile, and definitely see the context of and the reality as that plays out. But I think active dialogue and a real kind of learning narrative is so important, and a willingness to not get it right all the time, because we're not going to get it right. But if we have the right intentions and we can go forward and keep that dialogue and movement, I know sometimes in processes, in the negotiations, that gets muddled because things take time and decisions have to be made, but it's a little bit easier in the real economy. And I think one of the reasons last year we were able to move so quickly with the Riyadh Action Agenda is because we had nothing to lose. We were starting from scratch, and we had this huge momentum of partners, from UN agencies, from companies, from private sector organizations, NGOs, faith communities, that were really calling to create that common narrative, that common voice. And what is so exciting about this is the link to the North Star message, as well as those stories that you hear on the ground. And I think, those stories that are coming from those communities that are being impacted by mines. We talked about that in the session next door with the farming communities. So I think this idea of just continuous dialogue, testing things, seeing what works and what doesn't work, and then adapting can be quite helpful as well.
Thank you, Jennifer. And I think it's quite beautiful to see that we have everyone here today already collaborating. So there is really good hope for the future of how we can make this even stronger. I just want to also say thank you. I know we're at nearly the end of COP, so everyone is tired and we're still pushing hard. So I think that deserves an applause. So thank you, everyone. Yes, we're almost there, but good job. And then I just want to quickly sum up the last 3 points of things that I've heard from today. I think some of the key emerging things are there's still a need for alignment. So across metrics, frameworks, reporting structures, there's still fragmentation, so we still have work to do. Second, around corporate accountability and how we must go beyond disclosure towards measurable real-world transformation across climate, biodiversity, and land. And then lastly, that there is strong momentum. We heard examples today of how this is moving forward and how the private sector is getting involved, and towards developing shared approaches, and that includes towards COP17. So I thank you for our panelists, for our opening, for Gonzalo, and for everyone who has been in the room today for this session, and good luck with the rest of your COPs. We wrap early to give everyone some time.